Good morning, students. I hope you can see my screen. So, a very quick recap. So, in previous session, we have discussed about streams and then coding standards. So, this is what we have covered. So, we have discussed about IO streams and then coding standards or best practices we have discussed. So, we understood that IO streams are part of the java.io package, and also initially when Java evolved, we have only byte streams, and from Java 2 onwards, we also got character streams, which can be used for universalization by the use of Unicode. And I also mentioned that in today, most of us we are using only character streams than compared to byte streams because of the internationalization. And also, I have shown you with a demonstration of how the three streams, that is a standard input, standard output, standard error, that can be redirected to output log separately, error log separately with a small piece of code I have shown you as a demonstration. And then another advantage that with the use of streams is serialization, and even that serialization how we can achieve, I have shown you with a demonstration program. So serialization is nothing but saving the state of the object, or you can also say you are preserving the object state so that you can regain its life when and where required. So that's what the main idea of serialization. So that is possible only by extending the class with a serializable interface. So you, whichever objects you want to preserve the state, that particular class should implement serializable interface. And this serializable interface is also present in java.io package only. And once the class implements serializable, then its data can be regained when you unserialize. And that also we have seen with a small program. I have created one class serialization, and then we have seen how the object output stream can be used to write the object. And then with the deserialization class, I have shown you how by using object input stream I can read the object. And at the end of the demonstration of that program, I have also stated you that if a variable is declared static or transient, that cannot be serialized. That also I have shown you with example. So if the instance variable is declared static or transient keyword, then that cannot be serialized. That also I have shown you with a program which I have run in the last session. And in today's class, we are going to discuss collections. And as part of this particular Talent training, these are the things which we are going to focus on: list, generics, set, and map. So these are the things which we have to focus on. And before getting started, first of all, we need to understand what a collection is. So just remember the fact that collection, as the term indicates, it is a group. When we say group, we should also specify group containing what. By the term collection, everyone can understand it is a group but group containing what? That's what you need to understand. So basically, collection itself is an object which represents group of objects. I repeat, basically collection itself is an object which represents a group of objects, and Java provided this collection framework for representing and manipulating collections. And I'll just first initially give you the intro of these collections, and then I'll directly open the IDE and just I'll demonstrate you with a few collections. First, we get started with the list. As you have seen in the sequence, first we have start with the list, and then how we can create generic class, and what is generics, what is the purpose of generics, all that I'll just discuss theoretically and practically also. I'll just show you. Yeah, coming back to the intro of this collection. So Java provided this collection framework in order to represent and manipulate several collections. Java.util package contains this most powerful Java subsystem, and in real world, most of the people will be calling Java.util package as collections because it is the one containing all this collection framework. For that reason, they will refer util package by the term collections. This Java's util package provides so many old collection classes. In industry terms, we call it as legacy classes, and it also contains new collection classes and some useful interfaces as well. The major advantages that we get by going with these collections is, the very first and foremost advantage is it reduces the programming effort. It reduces the programming effort. How it reduces the programming effort means, because this collection contains several inbuilt data structures and algorithms. I mean, this java.util package contains several inbuilt data structures and algorithms. Thereby, it reduces your programming effort. For example, if you want to create an application for converting infix to postfix expression, I'm just giving you a small example, but think in a wider range. I'm just giving you a basic example. Suppose you are interested to convert infix to postfix expression, or you are interested to perform postfix evaluation. You know that for performing both these tasks, you require a stack. In C language, you might have experienced that first you will be creating stack, and then the operations you define, and then the actual code you used to write for doing this infix to postfix or postfix evaluation. But with util package in Java, you have stack already inbuilt, so you can directly create object to the stack of util package, and directly you can write code for converting your infix to postfix or postfix evaluation by directly using the existing stack. Not only stack, like this you have list available, queue available, maps available. So you have several inbuilt data structures and algorithms through which you can reduce your programming effort. This is the first and foremost advantage. And coming to the second advantage, it increases the performance. How the performance gets increased? Basically, whatever the code you write, it may differ with respect to the code written by others. And you also know that if you are given a problem, you will be writing your own code, which all the test cases might be passed. Another person will be writing his own code by making sure that all the test cases will be passed. But when you run you know that when it gives the time taken will differ. Both of your code have successfully passed through all the test cases, but still the time differs. The execution time, whatever we say, that differs. How? It depends on how and what kind of code you are writing to solve that particular problem. Similarly, here also we have several inbuilt data structures and algorithms that were implemented with high performance code. In this java.util package, we have several inbuilt data structures and algorithms that are implemented using high performance code. Since you are reusing this code, obviously your application performance also will be increased. That is how these collections will increase the performance. This is the second advantage. And coming to the third advantage, it provides the interoperability. It provides interoperability. That means it provides several interfaces through which one can communicate with other. That is what we say interoperability. So unrelated APIs also can communicate with one another. Such way, the interface mechanism is being provided by this collection framework. And the next advantage is it reduces the effort required for designing and implementing new APIs as well. It reduces the effort required for designing and implementing new APIs. And coming to the next advantage, software reusability is achieved here. Software reusability is achieved here. So like this you have several advantages, but I have just picked up the major advantages that you have with going to this collections framework. Now, what are the various operations that you can perform over this collections? What will be the various operations that can be performed over this collections? So when we say collection, and when I'm saying that it is a group of objects, so when you say that it is a group of objects, you can just think of it like a huge box where you can put in several objects inside it. Then automatically you will be able to understand what are the various operations that you can perform over this huge box containing several objects. So you can keep adding objects, you can remove some objects, you can search for the required object, you can arrange these objects, I mean sorting, you can navigate through the objects. So these are the basic operations that can be possible over any collection. Just assume it's like a huge box or a container containing several objects. So when you have a huge container containing several objects, you can understand what will be the operations that are possible for you over that container. So you can add further objects into that container, you can remove some of the objects from the container, you can even search for a required object inside that container, you can arrange the objects inside the container, which is nothing but the sorting, and you can navigate through that object one after the other like that. So these are the basic operations that can be possible over any collection. And what does this collection framework consist of? So the collection framework consists of interfaces, some legacy implementations, general purpose implementations, some special purpose implementations, and some of the abstract implementations are also provided for making it convenient for the user to only implement the necessary things rather than implementing all the legacy things also. And you can also have some concurrent implementations which are useful for ready-made app development. So these concurrent implementations of this collection framework will let the developer to develop some ready-made implementations very quickly, and it also contains some array utilities, some of the algorithms inbuilt, and some infrastructure that's required for supporting collection interfaces. These are all the collection framework consists of. So this is the basic theoretical part regarding the collection. And next, you need to understand the collection hierarchy. You must understand the collection hierarchy. So how will be the collection hierarchy, and what are its children, and what are its subclasses, all that you need to understand. So collection is the root. Okay, let me scroll down. Collection is the root of this hierarchy. Collection itself is an interface. The term collection itself is an interface. This is all the theory which I have discussed. So here you can see collection itself is an interface which is having these subclasses: set, list, and queue. These are the subclasses of collection, with the difference that list you can have duplicates, set will not allow duplicates. So something like that you have to remember. And further classifications also you can see with this diagram. I hope everyone can see the hierarchy here. So list is having subclasses: array list, vector, where this vector is the legacy class than compared to array list. That's the basic difference between a vector and array list. And then it also have linked list, which is being inherited from both list and queue here, as you can see from this hierarchy. And priority queue, I hope you all heard about this term priority queue. Based on the priority, the values are being stored. And coming to set, it's having subclasses: hash set, linked hash set, tree set. And tree set you can see, which is the subclass of sorted set, where sorted set itself is interface. So wherever you can see within the two less than and greater than, it is defined which is an interface. Rest of them are the classes, I mean the implementations of those interfaces, with some specialized methods also. So that's what there you can see. And here you can see one more interface, map interface, which we will see in tomorrow's class or the next class. So map interface also you can see. So we will be using maps in real-time application development very much, because it is containing the key value pair mechanisms. You will be using key value pair mechanism just like your dictionaries. And this is the basic theory of this interfaces. Here you can see collection is an interface, set is an interface. So in the diagram itself you have seen what are the interfaces, all those you can see. And the description you can just go through, since you all have your own logins. And this is what which I just stated from the diagram itself. So list allows duplicates, whereas set will not allow duplicates. And the maps, you will be having key value pair mechanism. So through keys you will be retrieving the values. Yeah, here is the complete implementation structure for the collections. Here you can see set, list, and map are the interfaces, and hash table, resizable array, balanced tree, linked list, hash table plus linked list, these are the implementation classes for these interfaces. So here you can see in this table, hash set, tree set, linked hash set, they are the implementations of set interface. Array list and linked list are the implementations of list interface. Hash map, tree map, linked hash map are the implementations of the map interface. And there you can see array list is resizable array, linked list is a kind of linked list, whereas tree set and tree map are balanced trees. I hope you might be knowing by this time what you mean by balanced tree. Similarly, hash set and hash map are kind of hash tables. So all this table gives you the complete implementations of this collection. And here you can see collection interface methods. As I said, collection itself is the root of all the collection hierarchy, and it's an interface which contains these methods. So you can understand that by using this, any of the implementation class can execute these methods, because we all know that any class that implements interface must and should override all the methods of the interface. Similarly, collection interface is the root of all the collection hierarchy. So every implementation class you take, it will be containing uh, definitions for these methods. That means these methods are accessible for every kind of collection. These methods are accessible by every kind of collection. Just like earlier one time I have said you, object is the supermost class of in Java, whose methods are accessible for every other object. Similarly here, for all the collection implementations, for all the collection classes, these collection interface methods are accessible because they are being implemented by the collection classes. These collection interface methods are being implemented by the collection classes. If not by directly that collection class, at least by the, what do you say, at least by the parent of that class. Like array list may not have implemented all these methods, but its parent list might have implemented some of them with the default implementations like that. Something like that you have to understand. And here this quiz, which of the following classes is not implemented from collection interface? Anyway, these things you will just get to know after the discussion only. Tree set, it's implemented from collection interface. Hash table, so vector is the legacy implementation we say. Linked list, so here you can see which of them are not implemented. So here also you can see from the thing, hash table. Hash table is not directly from the collection interface. So the answer is there, hash table. And which of the following is a class? Obviously collection is a interface, which we just discussed now also. Which of the following does not accept duplicate values? This also I just said you. So list will allow duplicate values, set will not allow duplicate values. So tree set is the answer here. Okay, so coming to list, let's discuss about list. So as I already said you, list is a interface, and array list and vector are the subclasses of this list, where vector and array list both permits duplicate values. Array list and vector both are the subclasses of this list interface. Both of them permits duplicate values, with the difference factor that vector is a legacy class than compared to array list. So when we say legacy class, you have to understand that it is very old. It's very old, having some additional methods as well. That's the basic difference you just need to remember with regard to array list and vector. Rest of them I'll just show you with explaining the concepts. And now first, as part of the concepts, first we need to discuss about array list. So array list will be using dynamic array for storing the elements, and it will be extending the abstract list class, and it implements the list interface. And another difference coming to array list and vector is, with array list you have all non-synchronized methods, whereas vector contains synchronized methods. And both array list and vector maintains insertion order. I mean, in which order they have come in, they stay in the same order. That means the very first element that is coming into this list, it will be at index 0. The second element will be at index 1, so that every the nth element will be at index n minus 1. That's what we mean by they maintain insertion order. So both array list and vector maintains this insertion order, but with a difference, like as I said, vector is a legacy class and vector methods are synchronized. This is the difference you just need to remember. Remaining things are same. like both maintain insertion order, both extend abstract list and implement list interface, with both duplicates can be stored, and both uses dynamic array for storing the elements. So all these things are same, and in both random access is also possible. Obviously, when you have insertion order preserved, random access will be possible. When you have insertion order maintained or preserved, random access is possible. That means since you have indexes, you can just access any particular index directly. But one thing what you need to understand with this dynamic storing of elements is manipulation will be slow. So if you are trying to insert an element in between, or if you are trying to remove an element in between this particular array list or vector, then it will be little bit slow due to the fact that since it is in dynamic in nature, so whatever the new element being inserted or whatever the element that is being deleted, obviously then lot of shifting has to take place there. I hope you are understanding what I am saying. So when you have this nature of dynamic way of storing the elements, definitely you have the limitation with manipulation being slow, because every new element that is being inserted in between, or every existing element that is being deleted, will have some overhead in shifting of the elements. So that's what the point to be noted. So with both array list and vector, manipulation will be slow due to the shifting that has to take place as part of the new element insertion or existing element deletion. So this is what the point need to be understood. And next important point need to be understood is, since JDK 1.5 or J2SE5, you can either say J2SE5 or JDK 1.5, because when you are saying JDK, you have to refer the version, that is Java Development Kit 1.5, that's the software version. Or J2SE5, the Java collection framework is generic based. I repeat, since JDK 1.5 or J2SE5, Java collection framework is generic based, and prior to that we say that it is non-generic based. Now what do you mean by the term generic based? So that's what our next concept, generics. So with regard to that I'm just speaking. So since Java 5 onwards, the collection framework is purely generic based. Prior to that it was non-generic based. Now coming to generics, what are the advantages to go for this generics and why it was added to this Java from 5 onwards? The main reason is, prior to Java 5, the compile time checking was not there. The compile time checking was not there when you are dealing with these collections. And another thing is, it was not type safe. It was not type safe. What does it mean? That means to a collection you can add any type of object, because as by the definition collection is a group of objects. So to a collection you can add any type of object. So that's what we mean by it's not type safe. It is not type safe. But in real time application development, we require collections which are type safe. That means I require a collection exclusively to store only strings, or I require a collection exclusively that can store only integers, something like this. So prior to Java 5, the collections are non-generic based, which are not type safe, indicating that any type of objects can be stored inside a collection. So compile time checking will not be performed with such collections. Compile time checking will not be performed with such collection. And another disadvantage what we used to have with this non-generic based collection is, for every retrieval you need to perform typecasting explicitly. For every object being retrieved from this collection, you need to explicitly perform typecasting, because you are dumping all types of objects into the collection. So whichever object you are picking, you have to tell what type of object you are picking. That is, you have to do typecasting explicitly. I hope all of you are understanding. So non-generic based collection disadvantages are, so you have to perform typecasting for every object that is being retrieved, because you can store different types of objects to your collection, and due to which compile time checking will not be done. And if any retrieval typecast is improper, then obviously exception will be raised and your program gets terminated. So that is the reason from Java 5 onwards, collections were generic based, which have these three advantages. The first one, it provides, or you can say it ensures type safety. This is the first and foremost advantage which you need to remember with regard to generic based collections. The first and foremost advantage is it ensures type safety, which means it restricts the type of objects that can be put inside a collection. So this is what the point you need to understand. So from Java 5 onwards, generic based collection ensures type safety, which enforces on the type of objects that can be put inside a collection. This is the first and foremost advantage. And second advantage is, since you are enforcing which type of objects only to be stored inside a collection, you need not perform typecasting explicitly. No need of typecasting, because you are enforcing, or you are strictly imposing a condition that only this type of objects can be put inside this particular collection. Then when you retrieve, you don't require any typecasting, because you have already enforced the type. So no typecasting required explicitly. And third advantage is, at the time of putting objects inside collection itself, the type is being checked, which is nothing but compile time checking is being done. This is the third advantage. Since the type is being enforced, so when you keep adding objects itself, if the type of object doesn't match, automatically compile time only it will raise error, which you will not even go up to the execution. So there is no point of abnormal termination. So these are the three major advantages by going to this generics, that is from Java 5 onwards. So let's get into the coding aspect and examine how these things work. Let me open my Eclipse. Parallelly, let me open my magnifier. Now, and yesterday I have received personal question from some of your batch, asking first of all what is a bean. I clearly stated, if you have any queries, do post it in the comment section. So people are feeling a little no, I think some of them are not feeling comfortable since it is in YouTube. Others will be watching. Don't worry all that. At least you can post during my class itself in our WhatsApp group. That's better, I think, so that I can clarify the queries during the session itself. So bean is nothing but it's a kind of class which contains the variables declared as private with public setter getter methods, I said na. So that's what. So whatever the project you are referring to, so your project will contain some variables definitely, which will be accessed throughout the other classes also, and those variables we will be declaring them as private. And then how you are going to set the values from other classes is by creating object for this bean class from other classes, and by using the set methods and get methods, we will be setting the values and getting the values. So yesterday I have shown you with my CPC project. So here you can see, I'll just show you very quickly because since I have seen that my CPC, I just got that thing. Here you can see. So for my project, how it will be given is, this is how they will be giving. So these are the variables that is required for the entire project. These are the variables that is required for the entire project. What are the variables you can see for this flight project, which I just said. So it will be having flight ID, flight name, and from where the flight starts, where is the destination, economy seats number, number of business seats, number of first class seats, what is the type of flight. So these are the basic things you can see. Now what happens is, this is what they will be giving. This will not be given by them. These methods will not be given. So it's very simple. Even though they give you this particular thing, they will tell what are the variables, and they will not tell whether it is declared private or not. You have to declare them private. But in the project, definitely they will define what are the variables and what are their type. What you need to do is, you just need to create a class for that particular bean, and then you need to declare all the variables as private, and then directly in the IDE whichever you are using, just do right click, and then you can see there source, and here you can see generate getters and setters. This is the only thing you just need to do with regard to bean. Since I have just received a question personally asked through WhatsApp, I'm just sharing this info. So yesterday, while I was ending the session, the very last slide in that coding standards and best practices, the very last slide I was discussing was about bean only, and I very quickly stated that bean contains all private variables with public getters and setters. So this is what it means. So I am just showing you my CPC projects bean class. So it will be containing all the variables that will be accessed throughout the project. But if the variables in the bean class are declared private, how you are going to access them uh, through other classes is, this is how. So you just go to the IDE and do right click in that particular bean class, and you will go to source, and there you can find generate getters and setters. So this is how you just click it, and then here you can see access modifier public, and then keep it public, and then here you can select which of the variables you want to generate these getters and setters. So select which of the variables you want to generate these getter setter methods. In our in my project case, I require to generate these getter setter methods for all the variables. But in some projects, what will be there means, some of the variables values not to be set by some projects. Sorry, some classes. In that case, you don't select that checkbox. So in my case, I require every class having access to set the values for this, or every other class can retrieve the value out of this. So for that reason, I'm just selecting all of them, and then click on generate. Automatically the methods will be created. So this is what the advantage you will be having with the IDEs. So you don't require much for writing the code. It just makes it simplified. So this is what the bean is all about. So I have answered that personally, but still thought of telling it for everyone. So this is what simply a bean. So a bean class is nothing but which contains all the variables that are required for other classes of the project, and the variables will be declared private. But how these variables values will be set and get is by using the public set methods and get methods. So this is how you will be generating. Anyway, let's get back to our collections. Let me use our talent project, and I've been using talent package. So let me just create a small class, and let me name it as array list, just using array list. And then let us also declare the main. So you can just click this checkbox, but daily I'm just using main and control space and then clicking on there. So this is my array list class. Now what we do is, here let us create, sorry, I think I made a mistake. Array list is a inbuilt class which you are not supposed to use the same name which is of the util package. Let me delete this. Because again it will create trouble. Yeah, sorry for that. So we have to name it something like array list demo, but by mistake I just named it as array list itself, which is the inbuilt class name in the util package. So array list demo is the correct name. Otherwise what happens is, when you try to create object for array list which is of the util package, it will not be created because array list itself is your class, so it will try to create object for your class. So always do remember, when you are naming your classes, just make sure that you are using a class name which is not of the inbuilt packages. So whatever the file just now I deleted, if I don't do that, if I try to create array list object, even though you are trying to write import java.util, but still it will be not finding that array list from the util because your class itself is array list class. So this point also to be noted. Now let us create array list object. Array list ob equal to new array list. So that error you can understand because I haven't done import. So when I move my mouse cursor over there, it will give me quick fix. So click on that import java.util.arraylist. Now first what I am showing you is, I am just showing you the non-generic version. I am just showing you the non-generic version, and later I'll show you the limitations with this, and then I'll replace the same code in the same class itself. I'll just replace the code with the generic version, and I'll just try to explain you that is how the advantages are. So now what I'll do is, I'll just add. So here I'll just give some strings, welcome, and then okay, let's write it very quickly. ob.add to ob.add java, ob.add training. So I'm just adding 4 string objects. So just understand that whatever I'm writing inside, they are the strings, but it will be treated as string objects, because as we have discussed, collection is a group of objects. Collection is a group of objects. So here array list which I am creating, this is array list itself is a one of the collection which is in util package, and I'm just creating an object to this array list. And I also said the definition that basically collection itself is an object which represents group of objects. That's what the very first and foremost statement I have given in this session. So collection itself is an object that represents group of objects. So here what we are doing is, we are creating an object ob to array list, and then to this array list object I am adding other objects. So here you can see what I am adding. I am adding 4 objects. Welcome is one object which I am adding. The type of object is string. Next I am adding 2. Next java. Next training. So I am adding 4 string objects to this array list object. Now let us try to retrieve them. So for int I equal to 0, I less than ob dot So here you can see one of the method size. So automatically it will be iterating within that size. And then now let us try to retrieve this, and string s equal to ob dot, we have a method get. So you have a method get which takes one argument, that is the index argument. So our index is I variable. So here you can see it is saying one error. Actually you are writing correctly only, that is ob dot get of index. You are writing correctly, and whatever that will be returned, you know that you will be getting it in string form, so you are trying to store it in a string variable. Everything is fine, but still it is giving error. So if you move your mouse cursor over there, you can just see the quick fixes. What is the quick fix it is showing you? Add cache to string. And this is what I was mentioning while I was giving you theoretical explanation. So compulsory casting need to be performed. Compulsory casting need to be performed. So this is what the point is, because you are permitted to add any type of objects to this ob. You are permitted to add any type of objects to this ob. You might have added genuinely perfectly, very neatly, only strings, and you are trying to retrieve also string by string. But compiler doesn't understand, since you are using a non-generic collection. Since you are using a non-generic collection, compiler doesn't understand whether you are doing it genuinely or not. You have to tell it explicitly like this by doing casting, and then you have to just print this. So it's very simple program. So here what I have done is I just created a array list object, and I added 4 string objects to that, and then I have taken a for loop, and I have run this for loop up to the size of the collection object, and I am retrieving one by one object and storing it in a variable s, which is of type string, and then I'm just displaying it. Now let us just print this, run as Java application. So you can see everything is working fine. Now for your understanding, I'll just replace here with some 100. Just observe what is the change I made. I have just added ob dot add of 100. Now if you observe, by default this value will be treated to be integer. So what is happening is, the very first object that is getting added is a string. The second object that you are adding is a what is it, a string. The third object which you are adding it to the collection is the integer, and fourth object which you are adding is a string. Now what do you see? You can see an exception, and this is what I was saying. There is no compile time checking. With the use of non-generics, there is no compile time checking, and that's the reason during compilation you don't see any error. You don't see any error because this ob, which is created for an array list, is capable of adding any object. Is capable of adding any object. So it's adding welcome, it's adding 2, it's adding 100, it's adding training. But you know to the fact that the welcome being added as a string object, the 2 being added as a string object, the 100 being added as a integer object, the training being added as a string object. But here how you are retrieving? So first element which you are casting it to string and storing, fine. The second element which you are casting it to string and storing in a string is fine. But coming to the third retrieval, it's actually an integer, but you are trying to cast it to string without any conversion. That is like toString method. You require actually toString method in order to convert integer to string, but you are not doing that. So compile time check, it just expects casting to be done explicitly, and that is there. So compiler what it is doing is, it is just checking whether the casting has been done or not, and since it finds that you have done explicit casting, it's going on. But During execution, you can see the real problem. What? So welcome and to were printed, but when it is trying to print the third one, it is saying java.lang.integer cannot be cached to java.lang.string. So this is the real problem with the use of non-generic. This is the real problem with the use of non-generic. So integer cannot be cached to string. That has to be done by you explicitly. How? By using the dot toString method. Anyway, let's not get into that, but just understand this difference. So here, the first thing is you have to do casting, and the second thing is you are not able to provide type safety. That means you are not able to restrict that the collection should contain only so and so type of objects. And the third thing is no compile time checking is being made when you are trying to cast an integer to string and store, and directly when you try to run, it is raising exception and directly your program is getting stopped. It's a basic example, but just imagine, suppose I'm having like thousands of objects, and suppose there is a wrong type object being stored in third position. What happens? Will the remaining objects be processed? Definitely not. In this case, you can see only training is stopped. But what in case if I am having thousands of other collections which are not being processed due to this one single statement? So this is what the problems with the non-generic concepts. So the use of non-generics will not provide type safety, and explicit typecasting is required, and no compile time checking is being made. These are the three limitations: no type safety, explicit casting, no compile time check were made. So due to which you can see the program got abnormally terminated by just giving me the description. That's nothing but the print stack trace. So the exception was being caught by the JVM's exception handler, because you were not dealing with your own exception handling with the use of try catch. That's what. Now I'll show you the use of generics. Now what is generics is you will be having the class defined with the type in the this angular brackets we call it. So I'm just declaring the type strings, and here also you can see string. Now you can see it is showing me compile time error, and what is the only thing I just added here? I just made this array list object as a generic class which will be of string only. That means now this OB which is of array list object is capable of storing only one type of objects, that two strings only. That's what I am declaring within the angular brackets. So this is what generics, which was introduced from Java 5 onwards. This is the advantage, and now you can see it is showing me compile time error, and when I move my mouse cursor over there, you can see what it is saying. The method add of int string in the type array list string is not applicable for the arguments int, and it is giving me quick fixes. What is the quick fix? You can see here, add argument to match. This one it is saying both you can do. So if you do this, this is how it will be done, but still it will be raising me compile time error. Now you can see it's resolved. And another thing is, here also you don't require this casting. You can see now nothing is happening. So this is how generics ensure you the first advantage, type safety. Ensuring type safety is nothing but enforcing to add only specific type of objects, not general type of objects. Enforces to add specific type of objects, not all types of objects. That's the first, which is nothing but the type safety. And second thing, the compile time check will be made, just like how when I have tried to add integer, it have given me compile time error. Earlier with non-generics, it was not showing me that error. And the third, no need of explicit casting. No need of explicit casting, because you have already created this collection object to store only one particular type. So you don't require to say what type you want me to cast to. I hope everyone understood. So this is what the advantage with the use of generics, and this have come into picture only from Java 5 onwards, not prior to that. But still, if your application requirement is to permit different typed objects, then you can go for non-generic also. Just like the very first program how I have shown you, if your application requires non-generic usage, you can still use the same class with non-generics. But in real time, mostly generics only will be used, and that too, this array list whatever we are using, it is inbuilt. But apart from this inbuilt generic class, we are allowed to create our own generics also. Remember the fact that rather than making use of the utils generic classes, you are also permitted to create your own generic classes also. So how do you do that? So let me show you a quick example how to create our own generic class and how do we use that. So let me create a class. So let's name this class as generics demo, and then finish. So I'm just created a class generics demo, and now if you have directly the class name like this, it will be treated as normal class. Instead of that, if you want to make it as a generic class, you have to specify within the angular brackets like this, something like this. And it's not like you have to use only variable t, something like this, how I have written. But in industry standards, capital T represents type. In industry standards, capital T represents type. If at all I want to use it for some other element, we will write it as capital E. So usually this thing, whatever you can see within the angular brackets, is nothing but it's representing the type parameter. You have to understand that across the class name, whatever I am writing within the angular brackets, it's nothing but the type parameter. You can have it with any other variable name also, but generally the type parameter names will be single letter, that too in uppercase. You can have your own name. Instead of T, I can write Krishna. It will not scold you. You can write anything. You can see there, no error it is coming if I am writing Krishna also. So similarly, you can have your own names also there. But as I said, since we are discussed even the coding standards or best practices, generally this whatever we write within this angular brackets, we call them as type parameter. We call them as type parameter, and these type parameter names are single letters with uppercase representations. It's just only to make differences between the general variable names and the type parameter names. Whatever the single letter with uppercase you are writing, it just separates it from the normal variable or parameter names. That's the basic thing. And the most commonly used the type parameter names are capital T, which represents type, capital E, which represents element, capital N, which represents a number, capital K, which represents a key attribute, capital V, which represents value. These are the commonly used parameter names. So even though you are creating your own generic classes, so within the angular brackets, the type parameter names which you are going to use must be something like this for making it understandable by everyone who sees your class. Because if I write Krishna, nobody understands what that Krishna type parameter is meant for. Is it an element? Is it a key? Is it a value? Is it a number? So nobody understands that. So if I write directly capital T, everyone understands it represents a type. If I write capital E, it will be understood that it represents a element. If I write capital K, everyone understands that it represents a key. If I write capital V, everyone understands that it represents a value. If I write capital N, everyone understands that represents a number. So these are the most commonly used names in industry standards. So it's better always you also represent the same thing, even though you are permitted to have any other names. And if you use like this single letter uppercase, everyone can understand what it is meant for. And suppose if you are having more than one type, right now here I'm having only one type, capital T. So suppose if I want to have more types, you can just use like this, capital U, comma, capital S, comma, capital V, something like this. These are the commonly used names. That is alphabetically you can know STUV. So this is how you will be representing the type parameter along with the class name in the angular brackets. So the type parameter represents what type of this particular generic class is meant for, something like this. Anyway, let's get into this thing. So public capital T, small t, something like this I'm just writing. So here you can see this T is nothing but the type. Generally, if I don't represent this, is it allowed? I'll just show you. So obviously you can see it will raise error, because if I don't specify that within the angular brackets across the class name, it will not be understood that it is a type. Now you can see it's not giving any error. I hope everyone understanding. Suppose if I'm just removing this, you can see error is being raised because it's not understanding what is this T. There you can see the error, T cannot be resolved to a type. But when I'm just keeping that, you can see nothing is being raised. So this T is nothing but representing a type parameter. And then let us just use set and get methods. Okay, as I said, let's use directly the generate getter setter. So here you can see very simply I have generated the getter setter method. So this is my generic class now. This is my generic class. Here you can see I have just created a variable T of type T, and then I'm returning that type. If get is called, I'm setting that type with some type value. Now for executing this, what I'll do is I'll just add main method here itself rather than going to another class and creating object for this from there. So from the main method, let's create a object for this, generics demo, and here let me use string, and then ob equal to new generics demo, again the same type, string, then okay, it has to be outside, and then semicolon. So now you can see what I have done. So I have created object to my own generics demo, and here capital T, as I said, I have used it for type parameter, and that type I am just saying string. That time what is the type? I'm just saying string when I'm creating object. So at the time of object creation, the type will be specified. When I'm creating object, the type will be specified. Now let's me just add something to that. So now what you can do is you have created your own set method now, so you can just use that ob.set of, here instead of T I'll just say the type. So I am saying since it is of string type, I am saying Krishna. So here you can see how it is being done. And now if I want to print it, so directly I can use sys out, and then here I can just call it ob dot Get is there na, so get t you can just tell. So I hope everyone are following. So this is how you can directly do it. Now when I just do this, since it will be returning that, so that's being returned. Very simple, nothing to tell about it. So what I have done is I have just created my own generic class, and within the angular brackets I'm specifying the type parameter. I'm just saying capital T, mentioning that it's a some type. Now you may get a doubt, what if I don't specify the type? Suppose if I'm not specifying the type, just observe, if I'm not specifying the type, so do you see any error here compile time? No, you don't see any error. By default, if you don't specify type also, it works. So let me just, now also you can see the output. How? So the answer is, when you don't specify the type at the time of object creation, by default, the type will be object type. The type will be object type. So we all know that object is the supermost class in Java. So here when I am not specifying the type, obviously the type will be the object type. And when it is object type, you know that you can add any type to that. Now here you see, instead of Krishna, I can also say 100. I can also say 100. And now when I'm saying 100, so still you can see it works fine. So 100 is being returned because when you are not specifying the type, any type can be added, any type can be retrieved. Because when the type is not specified, the default type is the object type. When the type is not specified, the default type is the object type. And if not 100, I can also say 100.5. If not 100, I can also say 100.5. So you can see 100.5 is being returned. Otherwise, I can also say, I'm saying true. That is Boolean. And now you can see true being returned. So I hope everyone are understanding. Suppose if I am specifying type, if I am specifying type, you can see what it is saying. It is showing you error. If I am specifying type, you can see the error because you are specifying the type as integer and you are trying to set the value to Boolean, which it will not permit you. So if I specify only 100, then only it works. Even if I specify 100.5, it will not work because it will be treated as double, which it cannot be. And if I write something in like this also, it will not allow. So only integer can be specified. This is what the advantage with generic programming, and you can use generic version or non-generic version depending on your application requirement. And apart from the Java's util package generic classes, you are permitted to create your own generic classes like this by just declaring the class name, and then beside that within the angular brackets you are going to specify the type parameter, and then you are going to create your own setters and getter methods with IDE, just like how I have shown you. Just do right click, go to source, click on generate getters and setters, and select all the variables which you want to create this getter setter methods, and from whichever other class you want, you can create object for this generic class of yours, and then you can specify the type, and then you can keep adding or retrieving that particular typed objects. If you don't specify the type, the default type is going to be object. I hope everyone understood. And few more queries I would like to address. I think even though others might have not asked, yesterday I have received around 5 people asking me personally about this particular assessment milestone 1. Let me just give the quick answer for that. So this assessment milestone 1 is not being enabled because even though whatever the schedule dates I have said, that schedule dates which we have sent to Wipro is for entire CMR. It's not only for our college, it's for the group. So the other colleges also have to complete, and along with you people, 300 students of our group have are doing this particular training. So the other college training also has to be completed up to this portion, and once all four colleges of our group complete the portion, then only we can request Wipro team to enable that particular assessment milestone 1. And anyway, it's only for making you understand that the milestones you have to write at this point of completion of syllabus. It's nothing that you are going to write it from here. A separate test links will be sent to your mail IDs. And another query which I was asked is, will we have CPC project now? No. The answer is no. You are going to have only two modules of exam. The first module of exam will be MCQ based, and the second module will be your logic building exercise. And that's the reason I was asking you people to do with this logic building our plan programs. And another query I would like to address is, every time you have opened this logic building problem, and if you are unable to clear all the test cases within the time, it will be automatically closing. And again, if you are trying to open, it will not you are getting it's not being opened. The only answer is, you just need to provide unique mail ID each time. You need to provide unique mail ID each time. I think most of you have not listened to my introduction video. If you have listened to the introduction video, you will not be getting that question. So in the introduction video also I just stated, every time you need to provide only four details: the email ID, the name, and the employee ID, and the city. These are the only four fields you need to fill in that form, and the only distinguishing element has to be the mail ID. So just for example, I am telling, first time you try to give with 123212331, something like this combination at the rate gmail.com, and the name and all those things can be anything. If you are unable to complete within the duration, that means all the test cases you are not able to complete within the duration, what you can do is, next time once again you launch the test and give the mail ID with altering the digits. Like I don't even remember what the number I said, something now I stated now, 1232123, something like this. In that, just alter the digits. You can give anything. It will not be validated whether it is a existing mail ID or not, whether it is genuine mail ID or not. Nothing will be validated. These are for practice purpose only. So, but if you are going to practice these logic building problems, all the 49 what I just stated as part of this M1, M2A, M2B, you can damn sure that you can pass with whatever logic building problem you will be getting as part of your assessment. So, just remember that to solve all the logic building problems as part of this M1, M2A, M2B, keep practicing. And as I said, if any of the problems you are not able to solve, do let me know, so that I'll share my solution which can be used or can be optimized based on your knowledge. And I don't know how many of you are going through. I have created one more playlist in my channel, that is logic building, and there I have started posting solutions to some of the logic building problems. I have posted three of the solutions, and I don't ask you to take that solution. I'm just saying, if anybody faces difficulty while solving those problems, you can just refer to my video and see how did I solve for that particular problem. So far I have created three videos on three of the logic building problems which I thought might be difficult for many of them. If you can solve it on your own, most appreciated. If anybody faces difficulty, I recommend you to go to that playlist of logic building, and you can just watch that particular video and then you can copy that solution, and if you can further optimize it, you are most welcome to do that. So far I have provided solutions for three of the logic building problems. That is one is adding numbers using strings. So you need to perform addition using strings, so the numbers might be very large, that even none of the data types can be storing that particular number. Such large numbers will be given, and you need to perform addition and return the result. So that is one of the problem. And the other one is message controlled robot movement. That's one more problem which I thought it might be difficult for a few of them. And one of your senior have provided the optimized code even in the comment section. You can even look for that. So whatever the code I have provided, it's only according to what I have written. And one of your senior have given the optimized code in the comment section. You can even check that. And another thing is the number number generator. That's also, I thought some of them may be confused even understanding the problem. So whichever problems I feel they will be little bit difficult, such problem solutions I'll be making and I'll post it in my channel. And if any of the problems you find difficult, you can just ask me, whether it in our WhatsApp group or personally, you can just post that, so that I'll make video on that and I'll just post it in the channel, which can be used during your exercises. Yeah, that's what. So just remember, this assessment milestone 1, 2, 3, whatever the dates as per the schedule, it's not just for you, it's for the entire group. That means other group syllabus also to be completed. And once we all four colleges trainers will discuss, and we will see that all the four institutions have completed that portion, then we will uh, inform Wipro team to generate links for your first milestone. And as I said, the milestone will not be from this PBL app. Don't worry. So you will be receiving mail containing two links. The first link will be for the MCQ exam. The second link will be for the coding exam. And both these you will be doing with Metal platform, which you are doing with the logic building our plans. So the Metal platform only will be used. And for these assessments, camera will not be asked. Don't worry, that also was the one of the question which was asked to me. So for these assessments, your camera will not be asked to be enabled, but for the final assessment you will be asked to enable your camera also. So everything whatever you are doing, the exam will be recorded on the server end, Wipro server end. So that's what regarding the queries which I have received yesterday. So milestones will be for the whole group, that's for all four colleges. And that too it will be enabled only with the request from our end. So we will be making a request to Wipro team only after knowing that all the four colleges have completed portion up to this IO streams. Then only we will make a request. And once we make a request, the next day you all will be receiving mails. And that mail which you will be receiving will contain two links. As I said, the first link will be MCQ based test, and the second link will be containing logic building problem, and it will be at time bound. I hope I need not say that, you all know. So it will be time bound, so you have to complete the test within the time. And since it will not be camera enabled, don't try to use your mobile phones and browse the questions and check the answers. Try solving it on your own. These are assessments only, don't worry. But still some of you might be afraid that if you don't get that milestone mark of 70%, whatever it is, you will be kicked off from this training. So don't worry all that, just give your best, prepare all the materials with these things, go through this PBL lab completely up to the IO streams, and keep solving this logic building exercises. And every time you are giving a mail ID, just make sure that for that particular problem you need to provide a different mail ID. That means if you are giving your mail ID for the first time, and if you are unable to pass through all the test cases, then obviously next time when you try to launch the same problem, you have to use a different mail ID. And another quick advice what I would like to give you here is, this code, whatever you are going to submit in the Metal platform, will not be saved anywhere. So I recommend you to copy the code and paste it in your desktop, so that for future reference you can once again check the code. That's one of my advice. So before you click on submit test, I recommend you to copy the code and paste it in your desktop. Give the name, appropriate name, such that next time when you want, again you can refer to that. So this is the thing regarding your assessment milestones, and that's it from my end for today. So I have just introduced you to collection, and I have explained you with regard to array list and generic importance. I have shown you with a piece of code. Any queries, you can post it in the comment section. If not, you can post your roll numbers for attendance. Any queries with regard to today's session, you can post it in the comment section. If not, you can post your roll numbers in the comment section. I'll be waiting. So I haven't seen any queries posted. I hope everyone understood today's session. I hope all of you have given your attendance. So let's meet to discuss few more collections in tomorrow's session. Thank you. Bye.